Right, so is Wes Streeting potentially looking at losing his seat a good deal earlier than perhaps we could have ever hoped? Well, it would appear that there could be some electoral irregularities having now come to light that, given Streeting's relatively small majority these days, certainly has the potential to remove him should this be in relation to vote counting. Not just if the count, for example, were incorrect, but if there were any behind-the-scenes shenanigans going on too. Questions and an investigation into what exactly happened in Ilford North at the last general election, at that count, and the involvement of the now somewhat notorious Redbridge Council do, however, seem to be somewhat serious, as the nearest defeated candidate for Streeting's seat, the Independent Leanne Mohamad, has tweeted out that legal action is in the early throes of commencing. So what exactly is going on? What exactly has Mohamad learned? Because clearly it is something of great significance. Right, so of all Labour MPs and ministers that we might perhaps cheerfully see the back of, the deeply unpleasant Wes Streeting is probably near the top of many of our lists. So it would be a delight to see him disappear sooner than later, in which case, and perhaps that is on the cards, as it would appear that defeated independent candidate Leanne Mohamad has got wind of something irregular having occurred during the count of the last general election and is taking it very seriously. She tweeted out, "I have sent a letter of complaint this week to the Electoral Commission and Redbridge Electoral Services outlining serious irregularities on the night of the count on July 5th in Ilford North, raising questions regarding compliance with electoral law and guidance. I have retained Bindmans LLP and Specialist King's Counsel on this issue and have asked the Electoral Commission to examine the activities of Redbridge Council." Interestingly, her tweet has been quoted by the Green Party candidate for Ilford South, also overseen by Redbridge Council, Syed Siddiqui, who added his own tuppence worth to this, saying, "Leanne Mohamad is taking legal action against the Redbridge Council for anomalies on the night of the general election count, which does not come as a surprise to me. I completely agree and would be more than pleased to offer evidence if necessary." What evidence? What have you seen? What is going on here? Unfortunately, at this point in time, we know little more than just this. We're now in November, though. The election was back in July. Clearly, Mohamad or someone close to her has learned something, and something of some significance, evidently, because retaining Bindmans as her legal counsel, big-name legal firm, and bringing a specialist KC in on top of that, presumably a specialist in electoral law, given the involvement also of the Electoral Commission, it's got to be something big, surely. We know from this that the irregularities, serious as they are, involve the count because Mohamad has told us that much. So are we looking at some kind of fraud here then? That does seem to be the logical conclusion to jump to, doesn't it? Now, in normal circumstances, challenging an election result must be done within 21 days, and clearly that has now passed. However, there are exceptions to that. And given the lengths Leanne Mohamad is going to at this point now, well past that 21-day deadline, it seems logical to conclude that an exception is what applies here, and the government's own website on the Challenge an Election Result page clearly states, "A judge might let you apply after 21 days if you think there have been corrupt or illegal practices, for example bribery, or your complaint is about election expenses, for example you think the winner spent more than they were allowed." Now, given that we are talking about the night of the count, I don't think we're talking about election expenses here. I'm leaning very much towards corrupt or illegal practices as defined on that website. I don't think an expenses issue requires Bindmans or a KC either. So we're left with what is ostensibly a quite serious accusation against Redbridge Council as the only possible conclusion to draw. Now, it's not the first time, if this is the case, that Redbridge Council have been accused of rigging a vote. The previous MP for Ilford South, the soft lefty Sam Tarry, lost a trigger ballot vote to retain the candidacy for Ilford North, for that seat, for Ilford South, sorry, for that seat when supporters of his turned up to the vote were denied entry. 600 postal votes mysteriously turned up late in the proceedings, and all of the evidence pertaining to this happening was dismissed by the then Labour Party General Secretary David Evans as an irrelevance. It left Tarry turning to lawyers himself as his defeat allowed Labour right-wing favourite and pal of Wes Streeting, Jazz Athwal, to become the then new Labour candidate for Ilford South, all despite serious sexual assault allegations having been made against him, allegations that the independent barrister Labour had brought in over that matter recommended further action against Athwal, But instead Labour ditched it, and the very Starmeroid right-wing Labour National Executive Committee dismissed those charges, contrary to the barrister's view, saying there was a lack of evidence. The determination to get Athwal on the ballot, as seems clear now, therefore, which did of course result in him being elected to Parliament, just went on to show how awful some of the people backed by both the local and the National Party are, though this just adds fuel to the fire that Redbridge Council has serious issues which Leanne Mohamad might well know something of now, and is now taking the appropriate action over. Athwal was, until elected, the leader of Redbridge Council. He has overseen Labour councillors such as Chanel Johnson quit the party. She quit just last December, nearly a year ago now. Athwal's leadership, in her words, having fostered a toxic, egocentric culture of gaslighting at the council. A council which, under Athwal's leadership, refused to acknowledge the genocide in Gaza. A council where people feared to question the way things were being done. Failure to implement the Ford Report findings. A lack of commitment to accountability, transparency, reform, credibility, trust, and with a system of cliques and silos seemingly in charge, contradicting all claims to operate a fine atmosphere of teamwork and open dialogue. And of course we now know all about Athwal's slum landlordism since becoming an MP as well, not only leaving people to live in mouldy, unhygienic, unhealthy properties that he owns, but later that he was the owner of a building occupied by a children's home, equally unsafe. And again, nothing has ever been done about him, about this. He remains an MP. He has never had the whip suspended, yet others have had it suspended just for daring to vote for a ceasefire in Gaza. Athwal, as it turns out, wasn't even the only former Redbridge councillor, also a landlord, to become an MP this time round either. Bayo Alaba was the Redbridge councillor for Wanstead. Now he's the MP for Southend, East and Rochford. He owns 7 properties, one of which was occupied by a mother of 2, who he has apparently just made homeless. A story covered by The Londoner, a quote from which reads, "A mother of 2 young children, she said she was terrified of being left on the street because she was being evicted from her flat. Who was behind the eviction? The flat's owner, Labour MP Bayo Alaba. I don't even know what's going to happen to me," she told The Londoner, with one of her children nearby. Technically, the woman had already been homeless for several years, and the flat had been provided to her by Redbridge Council, meaning that the same council in which Alaba served as a councillor was paying him rent for so-called temporary accommodation. They, the council, could move me to Birmingham. They could give me a 1-bedroom flat, the tenant told us. It's stressful. Since we made our visit, the mother has been evicted. She was made to leave the flat on October 21st, just 1 week before Alaba posted his tweet about how nobody should have to spend the night on the streets. We don't know what has happened to her afterwards and haven't been given any information on her current status by the council or Alaba. So when you take all of this into consideration, the way this council is run, and you then add people like Athwal and Alaba, and then add in the likes of Wes Streeting into this mix, or even the former MP for Ilford South before Sam Tarry, the loathsome Mike Gapes, is it so hard to believe such an unpleasant collection of individuals are closing ranks to protect their own, even through a general election count? The council leader got elected. His pal Streeting did too. I'm minded to come back to a point I made earlier about 600 votes coming out of seemingly nowhere in relation to Sam Tarry losing his seat to Jazz Athwal, and then consider that Leanne Mohamad only lost to Wes Streeting by 528 votes. That's the size of Streeting's majority now. And you have to wonder to yourself, did a bag of last-minute votes mysteriously appear for Streeting too? Whatever the truth of the matter, whatever Leanne Mohamad is lawyering up over, I dare say we're going to find out in due course. It is absolutely worth paying a close eye to this, pay attention to it, especially if it means one of the worst Labour MPs going could well end up going for an early bath as his parliamentary career comes to a none too soon conclusion. I can't imagine what else, frankly, could explain the actions of Leanne Mohamad right here and right now. If you're not familiar with Leanne or her campaign or what she stood for, she was absolutely one of the standout candidates during the general election. It was a tragic loss that she didn't get elected to Parliament, not only because she was standing against Streeting, but because she was standing as a British Palestinian against one of the worst pro-Israel voices at that as well. Check out this video recommendation here, all about Leanne as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.